Top 5 Gruesome Fairy Tale Origins. Number 5. Sleeping Beauty. In the original Sleeping Beauty, the lovely princess is put to sleep when she pricks her finger on a spindle. She sleeps for 100 years when a prince finally arrives, kisses her, and awakens her. They fall in love, marry, and, surprise surprise, live happily ever after. But alas, the original tale is not so sweet. In fact, you have to read this to believe it. In the original, the young woman is put to sleep because of a prophecy, rather than a curse. And it isn't the kiss of a prince which wakes her up, the king seeing her asleep, and rather fancying having a bit, rapes her. After 9 months she gives birth to 2 children, while she is still asleep. One of the children sucks her finger, which removes the piece of flax which was keeping her asleep. She wakes up to find herself raped and the mother of 2 kids. Number 4. Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. In this heartwarming tale, we hear of pretty little Goldilocks who finds the house of the 3 bears. She sneaks inside and eats their food, sits in their chairs, and finally falls asleep on the bed of the littlest bear. When the bears return home they find her asleep. She awakens and escapes out the window in terror. The original tale, which actually only dates to 1837, has 2 possible variations. In the first, the bears find Goldilocks and rip her apart and eat her. In the second, Goldilocks is actually an old hag who, like the sanitized version, jumps out of a window when the bears wake her up. The story ends by telling us that she either broke her neck in the fall, or was arrested for vagrancy and sent to the House of Correction. Number 3. The widely known version of Hansel and Gretel, we hear of 2 little children who become lost in the forest, eventually finding their way to a gingerbread house which belongs to a wicked witch. The children end up enslaved for a time as the witch prepares them for eating. They figure their way out and throw the witch in a fire and escape. In an earlier French version of this tale, called The Lost Children, instead of a witch we have a devil. Now the wicked old devil is tricked by the children, in much the same way as Hansel and Gretel, but he works it out and puts together a sawhorse to put one of the children on to bleed. That isn't an error, he really does. The children pretend not to know how to get on the sawhorse, so the devil's wife demonstrates. While she is lying down, the kids slash her throat and escape. Number 2. The Girl Without Hands. Frankly, the revised version of this fairy tale is not a great deal better than the original, but there are sufficient differences to include it here. In the new version, a poor man is offered wealth by the devil if he gives him whatever is standing behind his mill. The poor man thinks it is an apple tree and agrees, but it is actually his daughter. The devil tries to take the daughter but can't, because she is pure, so he threatens to take the father unless the daughter allows her father to chop off her hands. She agrees and the father does the deed. Now, that is not particularly nice, but it is slightly worse in some of the earlier variants in which the young girl chops off her own arms in order to make herself ugly to her brother who is trying to rape her. In another variant, the father chops off the daughter's hands because she refuses to let him have sex with her. Number 1. Cinderella. In the modern Cinderella fairy tale we have the beautiful Cinderella swept off her feet by the prince and her wicked stepsisters marrying 2 lords, with everyone living happily ever after. The fairy tale has its origins way back in the 1st century BC, where Strobo's heroine was actually called Rhodopis, not Cinderella. The story was very similar to the modern one with the exception of the glass slippers and pumpkin coach. But, lurking behind the pretty tale is a more sinister variation by the Grimm brothers. In this version, the nasty stepsisters cut off parts of their own feet in order to fit them into the glass slipper, hoping to fool the prince. The prince is alerted to the trickery by 2 pigeons who peck out the stepsisters' eyes. They end up spending the rest of their lives as blind beggars while Cinderella gets to lounge about in luxury at the prince's castle.